Before I worked at Absolut, I was with Scandinavian Airlines for 10 years. I was working, first I actually started my career there as a trainee, working in different departments, and I quickly found that marketing was my thing and the thing that I really enjoyed doing. So I was actually responsible for the sale on board Scandinavian Airlines. And part of my achievement when it comes to the sale on board was actually doing a twin pack of Absolut Vodka. And that was sold all around the world very efficiently and called Absolut Airborne. And also that consisted of cosmetics and gifts and so on. And we repositioned that business because duty-free was about to vanish in Europe by this time. And therefore we had to change how we sold duty-free, because the majority, I think 80% of our sales during that time was actually tax-free goods like cigarettes and liquor. So we had to reposition the whole business versus accessories and gifts. And I did that very successfully and ended up changing department after that to the branding department at Scandinavian Airlines, where I was responsible for the branding and worked as a brand manager for 3 years for Scandinavian Airlines, working as the responsible for the repositioning when it comes to branding and communication guidelines for SAS in 1999, when it's changed its position from the businessman's airline to the Scandinavian airline. And then I started Absolut in year 2000 and was there for 6 years as the global marketing director. For me, it's important not to just look at anybody as your goal. It's important to know who is my consumer, who is my target group, what are their triggers, what are the things that will make them interested, what are the things that they will think connects them to my message. And I have to know my consumers via focus groups and via quantitative studies and meeting them. I like to go out and meet my target group and really understand them from the depth, because that's when I can connect and really understand how my brand can play a role in their lives. Because I know there's so much more to life than my product for the consumer, and I need to know how my product can play a role in their lives. Yeah, I do. I love that, and to sit and listen to people, and I ask the interviewees to ask questions like that and pose in different directions and get different angles on what that person said afterwards and all that. I also like to analyze how I can change the perception of people who are convinced that my product or my brand is not for them. Even though I think it's really important to be focused, I think it's important to think that even though I want this group to love me, I must accept that there's people that are not going to love me, maybe even hate me, but it's important for me to focus and to be successful among the target that I want to convey. Yeah, I think I'm glad you're asking about that, because that was really my project. We saw that we had art and fashion as platform for Absolut, and we saw that art was connecting with a very trend conscious and very sophisticated target group, while fashion was more broad. But we could see that vodka was consumed in clubs, restaurants, at home, and we wanted to be closer to that atmosphere, and we thought that music was a way of connecting and getting closer to the consumers' lives. And we knew that music for younger consumers, that is above 21 years old, was something that was connecting and played a great role in their lives. So what we did was actually, that was a challenge, because Absolut was a very visual brand, having been the bottle shape and really seeing to that the visual recognition came through all the time. Going into non-visual media like music was a challenge. But we actually asked 3 up-and-coming producers, Arid Bricka and 2 other DJs, who we were asking whether they could make their own interpretation of the Absolut bottle and the Absolut brand. And one came up with putting in the Absolut bottle shape into an oscilloscope, which is actually a machine that makes sound out of shapes. And he put the Absolut bottle shape into an oscilloscope, and we got a very fun track that was electronic but was playing the Absolut shape. And another group, they were actually filling the bottle with liquid, hopefully vodka, and they recorded the sound of the bottle when it was full, when it was half full, when it was empty, and recorded that sound into the keyboard, and played the Absolut sound from the bottle, and sang about Absolut, what Absolut was about them, the word Absolut, what was Absolut in their life. And the third one was actually a DJ that was creating a party for all the famous people that had been working for Absolut, and they had to give a key word when entering that party, and it was more of a disco song. But that all the inspiration, that really did it for me, and let's see that you could go outside of your frames, which actually was art and fashion that we have worked with during such a long time, but that you can do things that opens your mind, opens your spirit, and connects to your consumer in a different way. I really love that, and then that ended up and became even a bigger project afterwards, and more than 10 other up-and-coming DJs and producers did that in other countries, and we had parties, and they were able to perform. We also continued the music platform with asking Lenny Kravitz to do his track of his interpretation of Absolut, and that was a song that he called Breathe. And when doing so, when Lenny Kravitz being quite an established and renowned artist, we went out to ask 10 different producers in 10 different countries. That was Mexico, US, Germany, UK, Sweden, Spain, China, Australia, to make their own tracks and their own interpretations of the Lenny Kravitz track. And that made up their interpretation and music interpretation of the Absolut brand via the Lenny Kravitz brand. And that you could go into a website and listen to that music, and we had more than 200 million connections with consumers all around the world with that communication. And that's really my highlight when it comes to Absolut. I love that. I did work with Stella McCartney and Jean-Paul Gaultier, and we wanted to bring back a little bit of the Swedish heritage into the Absolut brand, because we think a brand like Absolut, being very fashionable, very appearing a little bit superficial sometimes, must have a base, must have a brand story. And the story about Absolut is that every drop of Absolut is made in Sweden, in a small tiny town that is called Åhus, Sweden. So we wanted actually to connect back to what Helmut Newton did in the early 1990s, when he was photographing fashion designers in the factory and the garments in the factory. We wanted to connect a little bit back to Sweden, so we gave the task to Jean-Paul Gaultier to make his interpretation of the Absolut brand and the Absolut bottle, but also of Swedish legends. And Swedish legends that were, for example, the Midsummer, the longest night during the summer, the Lucia, which is the girl who comes during the darkest days of the year with light and wakens up people in the morning with coffee and cinnamon buns. And with other legends we had the elves who were dancing in the mist, bringing out young men into mystery. And we had the Valborg, which is celebrating the spring. So we had 8 or 10 different legends that he made haute couture interpretation of. And we went out in the archipelago outside of Stockholm, went out to these small islands and photographed this in the daylight. And that became a really, really good campaign that ran worldwide. The inauguration of the campaign was actually at the Stockholm, at the Drottningholm Theatre, which is a royal theatre that is outside of Stockholm, where we invited VIPs from all over the world, and they could see the garments afterwards.